My name is Steve Hernandez, and I am the Executive Director of the Connecticut State Legislature's Nonpartisan Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity. We are so proud today to be hosting a virtual conversation on parenting LGBTQ plus kids, raising awareness about ways to help kids feel socially, emotionally, and physically safe. You know, what's so powerful about this conversation today, not only is it in honor of LGBTQ plus month, but it's also honoring so much of the other work that I know so many of you are engaged in and that we're engaged in here in the Commission in social emotional skills building and safety in all of our environments in which we may be, especially learning environments for young people, but also at home and in community. So I'm especially proud to have with us parents today who will talk about how it is that they're engaged in keeping their young people safe, feeling welcome, feeling accepted, and of course, feeling loved. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves, because what happens in the magic of Facebook is that you'll become prominent on the screen. We'll get to see you, and I'm going to recognize you in the order in which I see you so that I don't lose you. First, we have Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, it's great to be here. So quick introduction. My name is Sarah. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a parent to two teens who are both in high school now, and I am running a community GSA as one of the ways that I can support kids in our community.
Thank you, Sarah. We're going to come back to that because I'm going to want to know those details, but thank you so much. Welcome. Next, we have Kristen. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, yeah, I'm Kristen Tingey, and I'm the parent of 4 children. One child who identifies as bi, and one child who identifies as trans non-binary. I've been a school psychologist for 20 years, and I'm also on the board of PFLAG Hartford.
Great, welcome, Kristen. Next, we have Jacqueline Santiago. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi, such a pleasure to be here today. I'm Jackie Santiago, and I am CEO at Compass Youth Collaborative. I'm also a commissioner for the city of Hartford and the Human Relations. But today I have my most important role, which is mother to an 18-year-old bisexual who I love dearly and have just been so proud to learn from him. I've come here today not as an expert by any means, but as someone who has learned so much from my son.
That's great. Thank you, Jackie. Hi, Wes.
Hi, this is Wes Yantz. I'm so happy to be here. Primarily in my role as a father of a 13-year-old trans son. When I'm not parenting, I am also associate professor of sociology and criminal justice and director of the Center for Social Research at the University of Hartford.
That's great. Thank you so much, Wes, and welcome. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, my name is Lynn Hetrick, and I am the mother of 2 children. My oldest is a transgender daughter, and I am also the moderator for 2 Facebook groups for parents with trans kids.
That's great. Thank you, Lynn, and welcome. And you know, each of you, I'm starting to realize now, wear several hats in the spaces that you occupy. The biggest hat that you're wearing today, at least for this conversation, is being a parent. But I'd love for you to, you know, switch those hats every now and then, because it sounds like there is a lot of cross relevance in being a parent and then the things that you do to serve your community, but also the things that you may love. Finally, we have July Leon. Welcome, July.
Hello. My name is July Leon. My pronouns are he, him, his, él. First of all, I'm a son. I'm queer, and I'm a student at the UConn School of Social Work. And my mission and my calling is to help BIPOC, queer youth and queer adults, young adults of faith, at the intersections of religious trauma, race, gender, and sexuality. So that's where my heart is at currently. So I'm honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, July. Since you are the most, I think, youth adjacent among us, I'm gonna call you on. You're gonna be a little bit of a co-host with me. I want you to feel that way. So, but also, there's a thing that we do here called a responsive panel sometimes, where, sometimes we reflect together on some of what some of our other co-panelists may be talking about. So you are now hereby a co-host with me, July. So thank you for being here, and it's good to see you. Sarah, I'd love to start with you. So let's do this. I'd love to get to know a little bit more about you as a parent, your family, your experience. Tell us as much as you're comfortable telling us about just you and your journey as a learner. I think somebody said I'm a learner, Jackie. So tell us about your journey, Sarah.
I really love that word. I am a learner. I'm an educator. It's hard to be an educator without wanting to learn. And my kids have given me ample opportunity to learn as much as I can about identity. Both of them identify in multiple ways on the LGBT spectrum. And one of them came out very early in life. And so I experienced learning how to advocate for a child who was still finding their own voice and trying to find the language to tell us who they were. And our other child came out at an older age in middle school, and that was a very different experience. And I went in kind of thinking, oh, we've done this once before. I've got this. And then realizing I had a lot more I still needed to learn about how to best support and recognize my kids and affirm their different identities and the intersection of their different identities, because nobody's living in just one space, in just one name, just one word. They're making their own kind of magic mix. And that was a bit of a journey.
I love that, Sarah. I love that notion of that intersectionality that each of us bring into our lives and that your children bring to you. And you said something really powerful, which is trying to figure out how to support your kid. And that's something that that resonates for us, especially in the work that we do with parents every single day, whether it be supporting your kid in attaining an educational experience that's fruitful and safe for them, whether it's supporting them in their development as they grow, and of course supporting them where they have that diversity of intersectionality that you're describing. So thank you for that, Sarah. How about you, Kristen? Tell us about your experience.
Well, my now 17-year-old came out at the end of middle school as gay. And I thought, well, this is great, no problem. I'm very, supportive. And then we went to a True Colors conference, and I thought, this is fine. They found their people, we're all doing well. And then a year later, they came out as transgender. So that was a bit of a shock. And we had to, find a lot of resources and, like you keep talking about, figure out the best ways to support them. And my child uses they, them pronouns. So that's also a little bit tricky. People don't understand always, what non-binary means. People don't remember what pronouns are. So it's very tricky to help people understand. But I've learned to really follow my child's lead. And I think that was the best advice that I got from someone at PFLAG was just, ask your child lots of questions, ask how they want to be supported. And that's helped me a lot.
Kristen, I really love that notion, because we talk to young people. There's an element of self-determination and self-expression that each of you is touching upon, which is so powerful. And you see it very early in your children, that self-determination, self-expression, that naming of self that starts way before they have agency in the legal world or agency in our societal understanding of what agency means. They declare their agency, which is so powerful. And figuring out as a parent how to support that is equally powerful. So thank you for sharing that, Kristen. Jackie.
I feel like I am a constant learner, and there has probably not been more interesting topic to me than this, because it's my child. And so I have a youth development background, and I've always known to be an explorer. You kind of watched your children to figure out where their interests are, if they gravitate to one thing or the next. And I feel like early on, I was noticing things about my son, in particular, that he would tell me what everybody else's gender identity was, except for his. And I didn't want to pressure him. I definitely didn't want to, because I know it's a scary experience when you don't know how other people will react. And especially in, Puerto Rican culture, I want to say that, that I've experienced that there's some overt rejection of people that are not heterosexual. And so I know that he was probably picking up those cues and trying to figure that out. And so instead of putting the pressure on him, I would just kind of let him, and then we would just have conversations, and I would ask questions, a lot of questions. So I noticed that you know everybody else's. So what is yours? And he told me, I don't know. And my biggest learning lesson was that at that moment, I just had to step back, because he's in middle school, and say, that's okay. And you know what? No matter what, I'm here to love and support you. And, and I think that was probably the best thing, because at that moment, I learned that he needed to hear those words. And after that, the conversations became more regular. But I mean, even last night, it's midnight, and he's talking to me and showing me a picture. He says, I know you're a visual learner, so let me show you a genderbread. And here's non-binary and binary and all of the different pieces. And I'm going, okay, I'm soaking it all in, because it's, I feel like I have to get rid of a whole lot of old programming and realize that this is a new age, and that there are so many different things on the spectrum that there is room for in this world. And it's exciting and new, and I just have to learn it. And so I've also asked him to be patient and educate me, and tell me how he wants to be treated, or even his to encourage his friends to tell me as well and be open with me. So that has been the journey of learning for me. And I feel like I'm constantly asking questions and every day learning something new. And it's exciting in a lot of ways. And I don't always get it right, but I know that I'm there to support him, and he knows that I'm there to support him. And I think that's the most important thing.
Jackie, that's so wonderful. I think about, an LGBTQ plus person, myself included, when you go through that process of having to come out, right? And each one of us has had that experience, that coming out experience. And I often thought to myself, shouldn't it be parents that come out to their kids early on and say, you know what? I love you no matter what. And I wanna declare that to you, so that you never have to feel like you have to do a reveal for me. It's both ways. So thank you for sharing that, Jacqueline.
Yeah.
Wes, welcome, Wes.
Thank you, Stephen. Before I get to that little part of this question of my journey, you just sparked an idea, this notion of parents coming out to their children. And it feeds to the big part of my journey as I was reflecting on everyone else. I'm a sociologist by training, and we as a field have a bit of a reputation as being left of center, so to speak. We made it a big part of our field to study sexuality and gender and intersectionality. And so, up until I had a child, I saw myself very much as a feminist, as very much as a liberal, very much as very open-minded, sexuality, of course. And as we've all probably experienced, just when you think you understand something, life teaches you new lessons. So I was raising what I thought was a very strong-willed, determined, open-minded, empowered young woman until he told me, and actually told a counselor who then he said could give me a call, that he was transgender, and about 2 weeks before had asked about naming and how the name was chosen, and were there any other names if he had been born a boy. Blew right over my head. And I was like, oh yeah. 2 weeks later, said, this is what I want to be called. This is who I am at 10 years old. And what my journey has been, he's now 13, is really about understanding that, and I've always recognized as a white male of pretty much every marker of privilege in our society, education, family background, social class, race, on and on. One of the ones I didn't even fathom was my gender identity, that I could take for granted, and always have been taken for granted, even though that as a child with long hair as a male, being picked on by coaches and other males as being, feminine, that was something I had the privilege of taking for granted. And so this idea of coming out to our kids, wouldn't it be a wonderful thought that to demonstrate what you're saying is to actually come out to our kids before they even have to think about, is this something that I have to declare for myself? Declare for myself, this is who I am, this is how I got to where I was. And so experiencing my son's transition and the ups and downs has been nothing short of constant learning and constant eye-opening, constant reflection. And I think that's one of the most important things we can do to support our kids. And I hear everyone here talking about is the reflective moments and what we're taking and how we're evolving from that.
Thank you for sharing that, Wes. It's really powerful because, Jacqueline, you mentioned the things that we inherit, right? We inherit from our families, the biases, right? Without any negativity placed on that word, they're just biases, and they were given to us as gifts by the people that came before us. And in a lot of ways, our task is always to try and look behind them and see whether there's something else there behind that bias and what the truth really is. And that's a relational effort. It's a communicative relational effort. And Wes, I love your description of how it is that, that evolution is constant, and you're almost having this conversation with yourself. Everything that you bring with you, you're undoing while you're redoing and building as you go along. And it's really powerful. It's a process of parenting, but it's also a process of creating a gift that you're then giving to your child, which is really powerful as well. So thanks for sharing that, Wes. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. Yeah, for me, I've been talking to my kids since 2008, when the marriage equality passed here in Connecticut. And I wanted to let them know, they were 4 and 7 at the time. And I wanted them to know that I would love them, no matter who they loved, that they would never have to question that, if their parents would accept them or not. So I thought I was getting ahead of the game. But for me, kind of like what Wes said, it never even dawned on me to talk about gender identity. It just was not on my radar at all to talk about. And that's kind of one of my regrets that I wish I had, maybe that would have made things easier for my child. But, you can't go back in time and fix things. But so, I did the best with what I could, which was to make sure that they knew that, if they weren't straight, if they chose, or I mean, not choose, but, if they figured out that they were something other than straight, that their parents would be okay with that. But yeah, so then my child came out to me at 15 as trans, and it was a surprise. I hadn't seen any signs, and as I said, I was ready for a gay child, but I was not ready. I didn't know anyone who was trans. I just did not have any knowledge at all. And so, I did the best I could. And luckily here in Connecticut, we do have, the support groups, in addition to PFLAG and growing resources. And so, I'm the type that wants to just dig in and get to it, and let's do this together. And I let her know that she wasn't alone. She didn't have to do it by herself. That I was going to be with her every step of the way. So that was 5 years ago. So that's the path we're on.
Lynn, that's so wonderful. You were just, as you were sharing, you made me think about the commission. The commission administers the LGBTQ plus Health and Human Services Network for the state of Connecticut. It's a coming together of organizations that actually help members of the LGBTQ plus community on the ground, right? And that may be for health services, for all the other services. In a lot of ways, it's catching up, right? And it's finding our community where they are and then trying to help when in a lot of instances, either the damage has been done or the silence has been stifling in the lives of young people. And as I hear each of you speaking, Lynn, and when you say, I wish I would have, there is so much love in what you're describing. And I think about how it's an asset base that you are building, that you started building early on, which is so, even in that moment, it's resilience building. You have built resilience, and that in a lot of ways, so many of us are catching up. And so many of our community members are catching up. So it's beautiful to see the asset building that parents can be part of when they do, as you said, it sounded like you came out to your children early on, that you would love them no matter what. So that's really powerful, Lynn. Thank you for sharing that. July, you are, as I said, our youth adjacent panelist. And, I'm wondering about your reflections of your own journey and your reflections in your life, and perhaps reflecting a bit on what you're hearing in the panel.
Yeah, I come into this conversation out of a place of pain. I came out in high school. Long story short, I came home and the pastor was in the living room. So it didn't go well. And I've been thinking ever since, how do we support, BIPOC, queer folks, queer youth, young adults who came out, were not safe, right? Who, we do have support systems and we have spaces, but I feel like there's a lot of gaps in those spaces. There's still a lot of improvement to work on, especially for, in my situation, in my case, coming from a Puerto Rican background, culture and community, where there were a lot of things that I wish were in place, from like direct services or spaces that we currently have, but I felt like there was still a lot of gaps, especially my parents they don't speak English. So it's really hard to navigate that space alone, even though I had support systems and I had great people in my life who helped me through the pains and the grief and the sorrow of coming out, essentially. But that made me think about, what are the psychosocial gaps that we still have, from a policy perspective, from a direct services perspective, education, and yeah, so just like, what are the gaps and how can we improve and make sure that in my positionality, Puerto Rican parents, Latinx folks, communities have the spaces and the education and the social support, especially when coming out doesn't go well, right? When coming out is lonely, when coming out is painful. But yeah, that's my thought as you were all sharing from a son perspective and my experience with coming out and the different spaces that I had to navigate.
Thank you, July. We have this notion in the LGBTQ plus community of your birth family and your chosen family. And what's really powerful about those notions is that when your children come out to you, you're gaining another family as well. You're gaining their chosen family, people who they have found around them to envelop themselves with, to feel safe with, to feel reflected with. So I love that notion of that community and how community can be and family can be something that comes from within, but also something that you choose as an individual so that you feel that identity, you feel seen. July, it's so powerful because you're right. There are various ways in which young LGBTQ plus people can feel isolated. And that isolation, as you know, can be I said stifling before, but it can also be very hurtful. And so this is, I've always thought of, and I think of True Colors when I say this, I've always thought of the work of community and family as life-saving work. I mean, it really is. And so thank you, July, for bringing that to the table. I often think in this work, a lot of it is the work of adults, right? It's the work of adults teaching each other, adults talking openly with each other. I bet you there are families who are watching now, parents who may be watching now who wonder, well, wait a second, am I doing what I can to express to my children what I feel? What about my school? Is my school a supportive school? Is my community a supportive community? Tell us a little bit about your journey. I'd love to hear about each of your journeys with your interactions with other adults in finding resource, in building community, in educating and communicating about your experience. Sarah, let's start with you.
Building community really is key, and that happens on the adult level and it happens on the kid level as well. And so as the adult in this scenario, I see my job is to create a welcoming space for more kids than my own, especially as an educator, so that they can find community with each other, but also to reach out to other adults and create a support network, because quite frankly, our kids do a lot of advocating for themselves, and that's not their job. That is our job. They didn't ask to come into a world that wasn't ready to be fully welcoming and affirming. We did that, and we need to step up. So, supporting schools in doing annual professional development trainings, supporting schools in creating affirming curriculum and making even those little changes, like if you're doing word problems in math, does every couple have to be a guy and a girl? Do all those pronouns need to be binary? They don't. It's such an easy change. That's actually free. Supporting schools in having GSAs and, supporting schools and the state in having policies that protect our kids when they want to join a sports team, use the bathroom, feel safe walking down the hallway. And that's kind of school focused because that's what I do professionally. But, even in the community, you can create a community GSA. I think I spend about $5 a month on mine, and that's on snacks. It's a very doable thing for any parent to do. Just normalizing being very accepting and affirming and normalizing pronouns can make a big difference in the atmosphere that you're creating for your kids.
Thank you, Sarah. And to that point, Kristen, I think about your engagement in your community as a member of the board of PFLAG. Tell us a little bit about how adults can work together to build those safe environments and affirming environments in community.
Well, I think the biggest thing that Sarah shared was just about normalizing acceptance and everyone's differences. And we do that for other populations. So we should also be doing that for those in the LGBTQ plus community. We have students that will come out at school, and so do the teachers know how to respond. That's something that PFLAG can offer resources for. There's lots of trainings for schools. Many are free. So, talking about, instead of saying girls' lines and boys' lines, let's line up by color or let's line up by number. Instead of saying welcome, ladies and gentlemen, let's say welcome, everyone. Like Sarah mentioned, these are free, easy, quick changes. And I've heard it compared to like when someone changes their last name because they get married or divorced, you kind of quickly learn to use their new last name. And it's really as simple as that with pronouns, frankly. But I think a lot of people feel like it's going to be so difficult. So I think just normalizing the pronouns, normalizing, gender neutral language, having books and posters where kids can see themselves around the schools. And like I said, PFLAG offers resources for that, as well as many other organizations. It's just the schools need to really start reaching out for that and asking for that support.
Thank you so much. Jackie, when I think about Connecticut in every aspect of the work that we do, Connecticut is a very diverse place. I'm originally from Texas, and I think, if I need to find Texas, I can find it in Connecticut. I've been to rodeos in Durham, and I've loved every moment of it. And it's a very diverse place. So, our communities each have different ways in which we envelop ourselves around kids. Some of them great, some of them, we're working on it. So tell me a little bit, there seems to be some intersectionality because in the work that you do as a professional, you empower young people. So how is it that adults can use the positions that they're in and the work that they do in their own communities to empower young people the way that you do?
I think it's really about getting to know each individual person for their strengths and their gifts. And that's a youth development practice normally. I just think that we sometimes forget that that this isn't any different. This is another aspect of our child that we need to adopt and embrace and normalize, like everyone else has said. I think as a parent, I approach this, because I do have the youth development background, but as a parent, I kind of found myself a little lost. I was like, what do I do? And so I said, what would I do in my normal work environment? I would go to see if I had a colleague or a friend that could help me, a lifeline, in this sense. And so, not only was I talking to my son, he was the first person I talked to, but he said, he was in his teenage years and he quickly told me, there are just some things we're not going to talk about, Mom. And you have to be okay with that. And I was like, okay, heartbroken, but okay. I accept, and that is also a youth development thing, realize that, their friends and their environment become a bigger part in their life than the parents do. And so I started to look for opportunities and resources for him, but also for myself. And so I started to learn and not put all the pressure on him all of the time. And so I called up my friend. The interesting story about my friend is that I was in Chicago at the time at a conference, and I see this beautiful person looking at my heels, and they said, oh, I love those heels. I wonder if they make those in my size. And I was like, sure, sure, why not? And we were just so into the conversation, we instantly connected. We have been colleagues, friends, but he has been a great advocate for the LGBTQ plus community for a while. And he does a lot to educate community. So that's the first person I thought to reach out to. And he enlightened me. I mean, he gave me so many resources, books, movies, and then like live things. Connect to this resource online. There's a group here. There is mental health clinicians that can help you that are addressing youth that are from the LGBTQ plus community and have that experience. He told me about the different resources that were available that I had no idea existed. And I was blessed enough to have a community here in Hartford that was also helpful to me in that I found NCCJ as a resource, and my son was able to go to any town camp and find a community that really embraced him and loved him. And now it's Kamora's Cultural Center. He loves going to Hartford and spending time there. And so it's been, I would not have been able to do this by myself, nor did my son want me to. He didn't want me in his business all the time, as any teenager wouldn't. And so that's been my learning journey, and just using the resources and opportunities to support them, and making this a stronger community for him.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving a shout out to Camora's Cultural Center. She's actually going to be with us next week in the next of our Pride Month series, discussing the work that they do, which is also not only super affirming, but culturally grounded, and also, by the way, grounded in the arts and a respect for different types of expression, which is so powerful. You know, I love to talk about the power of the arts and expression in everything that we do. And there's so much talent in the LGBTQ plus community just waiting to happen. So it's exciting that you are working with Camora in that way, and that your child is benefiting from the center. But for the benefit of those who have just joined us on Facebook Live, today we're talking about parenting LGBTQ plus kids. You may have joined us in the middle of the conversation, but this recording will be available for view and for sharing later on. But Wes, we're joined by parents. And Wes, I want to come back to you. You know, the role of adults working together. You know, a lot of this work, as you said, Sarah, I believe, a lot of this work is adult work, right? It's our job to lead in this space on behalf of our kids. So tell us a little bit about how adult work has expressed itself to you, Wes.
Thanks, Stephen. It's an interesting question to consider. So much, I think, especially with you know, younger kids, of our focus is on their immediate experience. I know for me, you know, and at that age, a lot of it is at school. And we were very fortunate when my son did come out. He was 10. His fifth grade teacher was extraordinarily supportive, and she actually had a close relative who was trans, and so she immediately jumped in to support, connected to a very supportive school counselor. We had this huge feeling of warmth and blanketing of support from the school system, and thought, oh, this is great. All right, which was wonderful. But even in those spaces, what you find is that there's always work to be done. And, you know, for, I think, many youth who are already going through the experiences of transitioning to teenage and then to adulthood, young adulthood, reservations about authority, reservations about the system that they are born into, because they're seeing that we didn't create this, but we're experiencing the effects of it greatly. Is even in the most seemingly supportive spaces, there are microaggressions. There are, even without those, when people are trying to be supportive, there's a sense of inauthenticity in many cases. And so, you know, for me, many of those interactions revolve around those more micro-focused pieces, because they're thankfully, and this is not a criticism, because thankfully we do live in a state and in a period of our country's development, our culture's development, that is more accepting, more you know, willing to hear and to provide some changes to make people feel more comfortable. But there's still very much a lack of understanding and acceptance and true acceptance. And, you know, as human beings, that's what many of us are looking for, is authentic relationships and acceptance. And so I think what most of us, it sounds like, have experienced, and I think that a lot of us are connected to some of the same community, is that there is in Connecticut a longstanding, well-established LGBTQ community that is pretty inclusive. I mean, I've been in other places where there's a strong gay community, a strong lesbian community, but they weren't necessarily inclusive, whether it was race or gender identity or social class or other dimensions of difference. And they were. And so we got hooked up with some great resources. And I think that, you know, folks like those at Anchor Health, folks like those, like Tony Ferriola and his group, they got us connected to support groups. They got us connected to resources. We had a 10-year-old there were not many resources at all for young kids. We attended, shortly after, attended the Trans Advocacy, CT Trans Advocacy Group's annual Trans Lives Matters conference, which was very helpful. 2 months into the journey, we met other parents there, but hearing, as an academic for me, hearing other academics and doctors and researchers talking about the science, all the way to folks who with lived experience talking about their own transitions, those were the interactions that matter, and that was where the community started. And so now I feel like 3 years into it, when something does happen, and there are going to be things that happen, we're going to have to advocate for our kids or try to set a safe space ahead of time as best we can, that there are people to reach out to and say, hey, what can be done about this? What are some resources for this? And I think that's the most important thing, is that people are connected to a community that is fully accepting, that is going to embrace and isn't going to question. And that's been the most valuable thing for us.
That's amazing, Wes, and thank you for sharing that. We think about the notion of Connecticut and how, in a country that can be triggering, polarized, it can be very difficult at times. We do have these safe spaces in the state of Connecticut, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of our state for that. And then, of course, then you learn those quiet microaggressions that you were describing that happen right under our nose. I work at the network. We discover that sometimes people who are aging and having to go into a retirement home or into an assisted living environment have to go back into the closet because there are still those spaces that are quiet and those spaces that are where there isn't a feeling of openness or welcomingness, and there's an element of fear. So what's remarkable, I think, about parenting an LGBTQ plus child is that you enter a community that is diverse, that is in every part of the state. The members of that community are different one from the other, and every single family has the opportunity to be a part of that community through the experience of having a child who is LGBTQ plus. So thank you for that, Wes, and also for mentioning how it is that you found community to be able to find safe spaces to connect your child to resources, which is really remarkable. Lynn, same question for you. We think about, I know that you and I share a special interest, which is in social and emotional skills building. And I'll tell you, part of this work is relational and building those connective tissues of relationships so that we get to know each other a little better, and we can in a spirit of empathy, really support each other. How have you, in your different spaces, worked with other adults to create those safe spaces for young people?
Yes. Myself as a parent, I took on the role as protector. My mama bear came out. And, when it came time to start telling people, I took that burden from my child so that she wouldn't have to experience any possible negativity. So I was the one who told our family members, and I had learned through, finding other parents, in Tony's group or online, to just be matter of fact about it. This is the way it is, and not really asking for permission, but just saying, this is how my child is using she, her. And if you want to be a part of our life, then you will respect that. So I was the one who kind of paved the way for her, so it wouldn't be quite as bumpy. that, even though Connecticut, it has been wonderful and we really haven't experienced, any negativity, we've been lucky in that way. But, just in case, I was the one, who told family, who told friends, anyone who came to our house, I made sure that they knew and they were going to be respectful. I was the one, who called the dentist, make sure that everyone's using the right name, the right pronoun, and everyone is following it along, the way that will keep her safe and happy, and just try to protect my child as much as I could, because I know that the world can be cruel, and I just wanted to hold off as much as I could before she experienced that part of it. And when it came to the school, again, I was the one who went to them and explained what was happening, and knew, because she didn't actually transition at school right away. It decided to take a little bit of time, but I let them know, and that way they could prepare. And they actually brought Tony in to speak and make sure that everyone was trained and was on board. And again, we were lucky. The administration at our high school was wonderful. They were very supportive, and then they decided they loved Tony so much that they were going to have all the schools. That he's going to train everyone. And so so we've been very lucky to live in this state where we have the laws that protect the LGBTQ community, and that we have the support and the resources, whereas many places do not. So I'm just very thankful to be living in Connecticut.
Thank you, Lynn. July, as I'm listening to our parents share their experiences being the mama bear, or being the advocate, or being the trusted ear, but also the person to whom their child can turn. I think about the children who may not have had that, and sometimes the pain happens in silence. So you now have taken a mission to be the resource. So tell us about what it's like in your experience to be that resource now that you're an adult. How does a young person find you? For a young person that may be watching, how do they find you? And what's your process as a community?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, so say for instance, there may be a young person who's watching now who has experienced some of the issues that you did when you were a child, and now you've taken it to be your mission. How would they find you? And tell us a little bit about what you do to help young people, BIPOC young people, feel supported.
That's a great question. How can you find me? My social medias, my contact information. But I think for me, it's crucial and intentional that I create spaces for them, right? With them, right? That we create spaces with our community, not for our community. And I think that's important, that's crucial. Spaces that are life-giving, affirming, that are intentional to serving BIPOC youth and young people and young adults. And yeah, just creating space that is not there, right? And working with and listening to our community and saying, okay, what are the needs? What are we lacking? And how can we come together to serve one another and to empower one another? Yeah, so that's what I would say.
Thank you, July. As I'm thinking about each of you, and I'm thinking about your experiences as we've talked about them so far, thinking about my own family experience, it's not always easy. And in fact, it can be pretty painful. So if you feel comfortable, and I'm not going to call on you, I'd rather you volunteer, but if you feel comfortable sharing perhaps some of your more difficult experiences, and it could be anything, it could be personal, a moment of personal growth, it could be a moment of interaction in a particular situation. But I'd like for you to share for that parent that may be listening who's either afraid or who doesn't have the resources that you were able to find or wrap around yourself and your child. If you could share some of that, I would be really grateful. And I know that our audience would be grateful as well. Go ahead, Sarah.
Early on in our journey with one of our kiddos, they came out so young before the national conversation about identity was really happening. All of things have changed very quickly. All of these resources that my second time around I was able to find online didn't exist a decade earlier. And I found myself in kind of a tough situation where I was trying to advocate for something I didn't really understand yet. And that was very difficult because I have found that when you're advocating for your child, even if you don't feel it, if you pretend you're confident, pretend you know what you're doing, even though inside your head, you're like, oh, this is uncomfortable. It's generally going to go much better. You know, we did deal with some social ostracizing. You know, we were working with a very helpful school, but also a group of parents who didn't understand what was going on, and they didn't handle it particularly well or kindly. And I can't say it was easy. I can't say that we had a quick and easy resolution. We actually ended up changing districts, but it was critical in me finding my strength as a parent and an advocate and realizing how important it was to, you know, just act like I'm confident, make that work, and be really clear. You know, you can be kind and firm, be really clear about what my child needed, and to not hem and haw and well, and if, you know.
Thank you, Sarah. Go ahead, Lynn.
I think for me, it all kind of happened before my child came out. You know, as I'd been a long time ally, you know, for the L and G part of the rainbow. But as I said, I really did not know anyone that I was aware about, you know, that was transgender. So I was very lacking in that area. You know, I just didn't understand, you know, which I think there's a lot of that in the world. You know, if you don't know anyone, you know, and you don't educate yourself, then you don't know. And for me, a couple of things stand out in my journey. Were, you know, hearing the words of little Jazz Jennings when she first had the interview with Barbara Walters, when whatever year that was, but she was maybe 7 or 8, and just hearing the child say that in her heart and in her brain she's a girl. And that was when my perspective changed, and I just understood that this is how some people are born. You know, it's not anything they can do anything about. And so that kind of started my thinking, you know, like, oh, okay. And then even, you know, the death of Leila Alcorn, I believe her name is, the young lady who did not have a supportive family, and and tragically took her life. And that just really affected me deeply, that I just couldn't understand how a parent couldn't love the child in front of them, so much that they would be hurting that much. And so, again, that kind of added to my thinking, and just really, it stuck with me for all these years. I think about her all the time. And so when it came time for my own child to come out, I knew that whatever I was feeling, I had to show her love and support. That, no matter how much I had no idea what I was going to do, I'm like, I don't know, I was at a loss, but I knew that she had to know that she was loved, and I would support her, and she wouldn't, because she did fear that we would kick her out, because so many children are, and I did not want her to have to fear that she would know that she was loved. So I was definitely lucky to have those moments before my child came out, that, that to kind of prepare me, that even though, gender identity hadn't been on my radar at all, that I at least was prepared in that way, to love my child. It didn't matter, the outer trappings, the name, long hair, short hair, clothing, anything like that. Didn't matter. They were my child. And that was the most important thing.
Lynn, that's so powerful. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. And what you and both you and Sarah have described is your own expressions of bravery in spite of your own fears in the moment. Am I doing enough? Have I done enough? Is my child safe? And is there anything I can do to make sure that that's the case? So that expression of bravery, I think, is really powerful, and that is what they see. That is what your children see, is that bravery translates into love, and it's so empowering and powerful. So I appreciate that. Kristen.
Yeah, I would piggyback on what they said. I think the most frustrating thing for my child is that they're always coming out. They started EMT training today, so they had to explain their pronouns and non-binary and, kind of correct people. So it's like every new experience. They'll be going to college in the fall. Every new experience, they kind of have to come out again. And I feel like I'm doing that along with them. And we've been very lucky also with the school system, incredibly supportive. The staff has been amazing. The principal, guidance, everybody's been wonderful. But there's still some issues. For example, my middle schooler, overheard some, bad language, using the F word, about a friend of hers that's come out as gay and very openly gay at the school, running down the hall, don't touch the gays, that sort of thing. So it's still out there. So we really need to get the education and the teaching to the children, and start very, very young, with acceptance and the SEL kind of learning, the social emotional learning, so that there aren't those issues when they get to middle and high school, hopefully. But like Maya Angelou, I think, was the one who said, when we know better, we do better. And it's so true. I feel like we just have to be tireless in our efforts to advocate for our kids and to educate other people. And I do have some, friends or people that will say to me, why are you always talking about LGBTQ issues? But it's because it's so important. We adopted 2 foster children. I often talk about foster care and those needs too. It's just we talk about whatever's important to us, right? So I think the constant coming out, and then the whole, why do you have to talk about it all the time, are the two struggles for us. But even my 85-year-old Mormon in-laws have been very accepting, and they struggle with the pronouns, but they've been very accepting. And so if they can get it, anybody can get it, I think.
Thank you, Kristen. Wes.
Thanks. Yeah, I think just let me try to organize this thought, because I think there's maybe 2 or 3 interrelated things, and it builds on what everyone else has talked about. And part of it is advocating for my child, but knowing when to step back. One of his struggles and the things that he desires is related to what Kristen's talking about, is not always having to wear the trans banner or flag around his neck, especially running through school, championing the cause, not being the token trans kid in school, and feeling like the spotlight's always on that one aspect of his identity. So being able to read when, yes, in fact, he's absolutely in need of support and maybe even advocacy to the point of stepping in and intervening, versus when to let him, it's his identity, not mine, it's his. So letting him drive that ship. And so I guess a couple of examples that came to mind in this, the school is very supportive, and they have been asked what bathrooms, they asked some very educated questions at the beginning, but there's things built into our system. I mean, gender is a structure, racism is a structure in our society. And so it's within all of our institutions. And most recently came up with in gym class with state testing for physical fitness standards, which are presented very much in a binary on the board and repeatedly gone to, right? And this is again in a school district, in a school that's been very supportive otherwise, but for him, that was extremely triggering to be repeatedly shown that, well, these are the standards, and they're based on not on who you are, but on who someone else decided you were supposed to be. And so that's one example of he actually, I asked, well, is there something, maybe we should talk more about this. Maybe there's something that, we can do. I don't want to put too much pressure on you. I don't want to put too much spotlight on you. Maybe it's after the school year and we come back, and talk to them. He basically emailed his principal, said, I want to set up a meeting to talk about this. They sat down and talked about it. Then they had a meeting with all the teachers and brought everybody in from not only his school, but from every other school in the district. That he had to decide that that's how he wanted to handle it, and that's the role he wanted to play. I couldn't have done it any better or had any better impact by stepping in and championing his cause. On the flip side of that, as many of us deal with the associated mental health challenges that tend to go along with anyone in this community because of the societal reaction, but also because of the very real physical things that people deal with. Gender dysphoria is a very real experience, and it can be very deep, and it doesn't always, it's not always solved by love and compassion from a few people around you. That helps, but it doesn't necessarily solve it. And working with mental health professionals and others, we've had some experiences, for instance, with the family courts, where folks who were supposed to be working in his best interest and looking out for his best interest would make comments about, well, it is his choice to be trans, and it's if he were a normal boy, and these little microaggressions that are extraordinarily hurtful, and before they filter down to him, jumping in and saying, no. Okay, first of all, you're an educated, trained, licensed psychologist working for the state and the court system. Yep. Do we need to provide you with education? Because I have the resources that I can provide to you for that education. Calling people where they need to be called on it before it can filter down, because those are decision makers, and they may not directly interact with my child, but they're going to be making recommendations that will affect my child. They have decision making influence, and knowing that that's a point where you have to advocate, you have to draw a boundary. No, this is not okay. Versus a situation where he's very well capable of saying, no, you know what, I want to let this one slide. This isn't important to me. It's not worth me, wearing the banner today. Versus one where he says, no, I'm going to take it up. I'm going to address this head on. That's really a struggle, I think, for a lot of us, is knowing how supportive we need to be and how much to allow them to develop their own agency, and just to empower them behind the scenes and trust that they'll be okay. And if not, we can be there and help them up when they get knocked down.
Thank you, Wes. There's so many dynamics that you're describing, and in a way, you're describing a lot of different institutions that often we have to face in their own right? The institution might be the educational system. It might be government in its stoic or staid ways sometimes. It could be culture, it could be religion. There's so many different institutions that we have to confront in various ways. Jacqueline, I saw you unmuted, so I wonder if you wanted to reflect.
I actually was going to talk about culture and religion as two of my pain points. I think it's been very difficult for me as a parent to navigate, because I have been, I love my culture. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think that sometimes when you talk about how it can be not supportive for people, when we have, like the F word as a part of our regular language, and how we describe some effeminate characteristics as negative, or even something that my son brought up to me was, he kept saying, why is the Spanish language, even the words are male and female? They're binary. He's like, I don't understand that. Why is that, a thing? And so, just questioning and pushing back on some things, and, and really advocating on behalf of him, and has been really difficult, but it's something that's so necessary. And I know that he feels supported when I do that. And then, religion has also been, a pain point for us, because I think that when he hears, it denounced publicly, he doesn't feel loved. He doesn't feel like, God loves him. And so it was really important for me to search for my friend and have him tell me. He's like, girl, I was a part of, religion, and I denounced it when I was younger because I felt that it wasn't affirming to me. It wasn't a safe space for me. I didn't feel loved, and I rejected it. He said, until I found my own way and my own spirituality, and places that were affirming. It wasn't everyone that was, rejecting me. And we have had to navigate those spaces and find what is safe. And I'm letting him find his way as well. What does spirituality really mean for him? And what does he have to do to keep him to feel safe, and communicate that with me as well? And he's finding his way. And so I feel like we're in the middle of the journey still, and we have a long way to go. But I think advocating and having the supports, and especially having supports in the community, has been really instrumental, because institutions can be so hard to take on and take so long, but we have to do it little by little, keep pushing and be consistent about it.
Thank you for sharing that, Jackie. July, in so many ways, that's a lot of the work that you do, and that journey that you described of your friend, Jackie, which was, sort of the institution of religion being a pain point, a painful point, to them developing and finding their own spiritual way. That path is one that can be very difficult for a lot of young people. July, I'm wondering if you would like to reflect on that.
Definitely. I think, again, religion has always been a sacred weapon against queer people forever. And I think that it's been a pinpoint of pain and sorrow and oppression, but also I think that for me, I'm reclaiming my spirituality. I'm reclaiming my path, right? I'm being bold enough to see myself in those spaces, right? In those spiritual, religious spaces. And I think about the ways in which we are called to do changes outside of those spaces, but also inside of those spaces, right? How do we begin to transform and speak up and be bold to see queer people of faith and queer people reclaiming their spiritual authority, right? And also having spirituality and religion as a source of healing. And again, having spaces for folks who religion especially is not a thing for them no more, have a space to heal and process and truly healable scars. Because I think that's part of my story, right? Like I grew up in the church, right? It was not safe. It was not a safe space for me. And I went through a lot. Mental health wise, I felt alone. I sadly went through conversion therapy, and but to reclaim, like to heal, reclaim that power back and say, you know what, I'm an example to the world. I'm an example of a different narrative. And again, I think having those spaces to truly reclaim and reconcile those parts of who we are. Because I felt like for a long time as a queer person, I figured I had to separate those parts of me, but they're beautiful. And yeah, but that's what I wanted to share. Yeah.
Thank you, July, and thank you for sharing that notion of fracture, because oftentimes we are forced to to compartmentalize the different parts of our lives in order to keep each of those parts happy or whole, however it is that you describe sort of keeping stability in what in your own life might be a very difficult moment of development and trying to find your way. But also thank you for, you remind me, whether it's the Mormon grandparents or whether it's, the culture around us that uses words that are pejorative or hurtful or markers that might be something funny to one person, but to another is actually a very painful thing. And also the language itself, Jacqueline, you mentioned the binary nature of Spanish, and there's so many different conversations that are happening right now about the use of the word Latinx, Latine, and how is it that young people and people generally are reclaiming those markers, which in a lot of ways, as you said, Wes, are used to define them, are imposed upon them, rather than be tools for each of us to navigate our own way and define ourselves in any given space. So thank you all for sharing that. I think, as I think about parents who may be watching right now, who are wondering, right, who are afraid. They may be in one of these communities or under one of these institutions that are hard to get out from under and navigate through. So I'm wondering if you were to be able to communicate back with your early self, your early parent self, and a parent who may be watching, I'm wondering what advice you might give them as a first step, as a next step, as a way to orient yourselves, what you might say to a parent who may be listening right now. Sarah.
First thing is reach out for support. PFLAG is wonderful, and we have 2 or 3 in the state, and they offer virtual programming. And I would say have faith in yourself, have faith in your child. It can feel like the world is a dangerous place for your kids sometimes. Take the time to celebrate the fact that your child trusted you enough to tell you or show you who they truly are, because that's a gift. They wouldn't do that if they didn't feel safe with you. And that means you're doing something right. Keep doing that right thing. And then take the time to celebrate your child. yes, we are advocating for our kids, we are fighting for our kids, but it's really important for them to know that their identity is not a source of strife or conflict or effort. It is something to celebrate. It's something to acknowledge in a joyful way too. And so if you can set up opportunities like that, I had some kids that I worked with. We got the opportunity for them during Pride Month a couple of years ago. Wadsworth Athenaeum in Hartford did a Pride exhibit. They got to go up for community panel and then record their reactions to different artwork. And the museum incorporated those recordings into the exhibit so that anyone who came through could hear these youthful voices talking about this art that represented them and how excited that made them. And they walked away from that feeling so good about themselves. They felt seen. If you can do things like that, your kid's going to be fine.
Thank you, Sarah. How about you, Wes?
You changed the order on me. I got set in my ways. Good moderator. I think as far as advice to I don't know how much advice I would give to my former self, but I can say some things that, because we're much better at giving advice to other people, so I'm going to go the easy route. I think that one of the things being in part of the groups and hearing people and reflecting on their experience early on, and then how my experience has been, and what I might be able to say. The number one thing, and others have mentioned it, but I think it bears repeating, is that follow your child's lead, trust your child, trust yourself. I think those are two things that I can't stress enough. Don't necessarily automatically trust the authorities and the institutions around you to know what's best. They don't know your child better than you do, and you don't know your child better than your child knows themselves. So get over your own ego with that. You know your child very well, but they know themselves. Trust them. It doesn't matter if they change their mind, change their selves, find new aspects of themselves, whatever you want to think about it. That's their journey. Go along with it. It's a gift to be on that journey with them. Take that gift. And it's not something they're doing to you. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. I mean, we talk about circle of grief. I don't know if you know that concept, but the idea that when someone is grieving, the loss of someone or something, that the person directly affected is the person at the center of the circle. Those of us who are directly related to them, we're affected as well, but it's not our grieving. Our job is to support them in our relationship with them. We can turn to our peers and people who are at a similar kind of level or connection to us for our own grieving, or someone who's grieving less. It's very much the same with this experience, in my opinion, in that it's not my journey. Let him have his journey. Be there with him, support him, but don't mistake it for my own. Don't let my own ego take it in as if this is something that is happening to me. No, it's happening to him, and I'm there for him. And as long as I can keep reminding myself of that. And last piece is those moments, and we've all experienced them. For me, the one that stands out is the first haircut. We get very few photographs of my son before, during, and after transition, but the photograph we have after that first real haircut is one of the most priceless things. And there have been photos of him before transitioning that people would say, oh, what a beautiful photograph. And so I'm like, that's the one. And it's a kid dancing his way out of a hair salon with a funny t-shirt on, ecstatic because he finally got the haircut that he knew would fit him. Reminding yourself of those moments of truth and authenticity can carry through so much of this other stuff. So I guess that would be my advice.
Thank you, Wes. That's a really powerful image, I think, that I'll carry with me from this conversation, one among many. But that notion of that when reality meets your truth, and when those two things come together, finally, can be liberating and, as we've said, life-saving. So thank you for sharing that, Wes. Jacqueline.
I think I would give advice to myself to check my own biases, because you don't know that you have them sometimes. You really don't know anything other than what you've ingested and and pretty much taken in to build your own brain. And so you don't know that you have them, but they're there. And so I need to check those and make sure that you replace it with love and support for your child and for yourself. I think I spent a lot of time beating myself up because I could have done this better, I could have done that better. And I finally just said, I'm growing and I'm learning, and I'm loving and supporting along the way. And so, I had to, I'll echo Wes as well, check my biases, check my ego, and know that it's not about me, it's about them. Just give them the love and support they need.
Thank you, Jackie. And thank you for noting that, because there is often that question that a loving family member may ask, or a friend may ask, in that moment of revealing, right? Was there ever anything that I could have done differently to make you feel like you could have told me sooner, like I could have done something differently? And that's a really powerful question, because it does reflect that moment where, love comes through. But to your point, Wes, this is my journey, right? And allow me to experience my journey and share it with you. And the fact that I have shared it with you is an expression of my own feeling of safety and readiness because of who you are. So thank you, Jackie, for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Kristen.
I think one of the important things that I needed to remember in the beginning was that I had to work with my child on how they wanted to come out, when they wanted to come out. So some people, they chose to tell one-on-one. Other people, they wanted me to call on the phone. Their 4-H group, they came out in an email. That was just easier to let everyone know. So really, talking with your child about how they want to come out was important. And also that people's first reaction, they might be surprised. But I don't think we always have to take that as a negative thing. And oftentimes they'll quickly kind of come around and say, okay, all right, so this is how it's going to be. And they're very loving and accepting. But at first they have to ask those questions, oh, your child's getting top surgery. Well, what if they change their mind? Or, but as soon as you kind of explain it a bit, they come around, they're very supportive. So that's important to remember too. And then just that it really does get easier, at least from our experience and our friends' experience. There's a lot in the beginning. The kids have done a lot of research. They're miles ahead of the parents usually when they come out. So we're kind of playing catch up with them. But it does kind of settle down and it does get easier.
Thank you, Kristen. And thank you for reminding us, oftentimes in this work, and a couple of you have mentioned that, Wes, you said, don't trust the institutions. One of the worst things that I think we can do as institutions is feel like we have the answer. It's like, how can I help you? And I have been reminded time and again, especially when working with young people, is that we have a lot to learn from them, because they teach us about how it is that they pursue their own identity, they pursue their own sense of generosity as well, how they pay back to each other. I can't tell you how many high schoolers I've met who the first thing they say when I ask them, what do you want to do? They say, I want to mentor middle schoolers because middle school is so tough, and they remember it. It was right there. So thanks for saying that, Kristen. We appreciate that. Lynn.
Sorry, I was distracted for a moment. Yes, what would I tell my earlier self or other parents? Yeah, a lot of what has been said before. I would definitely seek support, find the community, support group for yourself, for your child, if they're interested, to meet other people, to know that you're not alone. Because I know in the beginning, I felt very alone. I felt isolated. I didn't know anyone. And it can be so overwhelming. So once you do find that community, it's so much better just to know that you're not the only one, that there are others who have gone through this. And it's wonderful to hear, the ones who, are off at college and doing great or just landed that job. So it's good to know that, there is an end in sight in a way that, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to fear for your child's future, that they can have their dreams. They can still do the things that they've always wanted to do. It doesn't matter, who they love or the length of their hair. They can still be who they want to be. Yeah, and definitely to reiterate, to trust your child that they know themselves. Children know more than we give them credit for. They know who they are. And so and as I think someone mentioned, they've done the research. They've likely been thinking about this for years, and they're once then you have to get on board quickly and definitely touch base with them as often as possible. We would talk, and I would just ask, so what do you want to do? What do you want to do next? And just kind of take whatever she said and try my best to to follow through with that, whether it's buying that first pair of leggings that she's always wanted, or getting a cute haircut, and it's just to trust them and to find find your path together, and be alongside them, not leading the way, because I know sometimes we can either be fixers, we want to fix everything and get to the other side, as our my local support group leader often says, is that we often want to get to the other side with transitioning, but sometimes that's not our child's goal. So we do need to check in with them and to see what they want, what will make them happy, because in the end it is their life, and they have to be the ones to decide.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for sharing that. What resonates, I think, for me the most from each of your expressions of what you would say either to your younger self or to an adult who may be listening is that notion of these parallel journeys, and the privilege in which you have, the privilege that you have described in having these two parallel journeys come together in this moment of your lives, the journey of your child and your own journey as a human being and as a person who's always learning and always growing. And that is really powerful, that notion of two souls coming together in this particular moment to figure it out and to figure it out together. And it's a real gift. So thank you for those expressions. July, in a lot of ways, as I said, you are youth adjacent, but you've been through this journey and you have experienced the pain and the healing. So I wonder what you would say to yourself, your younger self, and I really would love if you would share that, Joy.
What I would tell my younger self is, queer beloved, you are wonderfully and beautifully made. You are so loved, and you're not alone. It may seem like it, but you're not alone. And flip tables. There's spaces that are not for us, but flip them. Create something new out of it. Create a space for yourself. And if you're able, leave spaces that are toxic, leave spaces that are not affirming who you are. which I understand it's not a privilege for everyone, but if you're able, please do. And then to parents, adults in your life, I would say love, period. Everything else is commentary, you know? Yeah. And yeah, so that's what I would say to my younger self.
Thank you, July. That's really powerful. And I think, you know, what you described as that privilege, you know, I often think of privilege in the various spaces in which we think about. And for me, any expression of privilege is just, it's what should be the least common denominator. We should all have the opportunity to have safety. We should all have the opportunity to express agency. We should each have the opportunity to be able to surround ourselves with that supportive tissue, that connective tissue that will really allow us to become our true selves and to express our true selves. And what each of you has given us tonight as a gift is the gift of relating your own stories, your own bravery, your own fears, but also your own success. I mean, I'm proud of each and every one of you, because as a kid who's been there on that other side, I know how powerfully affirming and healing each of you is in the lives of your children. So I want to express my gratitude and our gratitude for you joining us tonight in this conversation as we come to the hour of our close. But again, for those parents that are out there, with this video, we're also going to be listing some resources. We're going to be listing some resources that you may find, not only some of the ones you've heard of here, but some that you may not know about, both for parents and for young people. So again, this has been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed each and every one of you. And I think what's really powerful is that while we are afraid sometimes, while we do feel alone sometimes, and we feel, are we doing the best that we can? The fact that you keep doing it every single day unapologetically is affirming and life-saving. So thank you so much, and please have a wonderful night.